The smoke still rose from the shattered spires of Kellen Prime when they found her. A human child, no more than 7 years old, crouched between the twisted metal remains of what had once been a refugee transport. Her clothes were torn, her face streaked with dust and tears, but her eyes still held that defiant spark that marked her as one of Earth's own. The Claren found her first. 3 of them, their crystalline carapaces cracked from the bombardment, their gossamer wings singed by plasma fire. They were healers, not warriors. Members of a species so gentle, they had never developed weapons beyond surgical tools. Yet when the Hegemony soldiers came hunting for survivors to enslave, these fragile beings did something that would reshape the galaxy forever. They formed a circle around the child, their translucent bodies creating a living shield. The lead soldier raised his weapon, barking orders in the guttural tongue of the Hegemony, but the Claren didn't move. They pressed closer, their antennae trembling with fear, but their resolve absolute. The moment was captured by a war correspondent's drone, broadcasting across 1,000 worlds before the Hegemony could silence it. In the footage, the child could be seen reaching up to touch the wounded wing of the eldest Claren, while he bent down to whisper something in her ear, a lullaby perhaps, or a promise that everything would be all right. The soldiers eventually withdrew, unwilling to waste ammunition on creatures they deemed worthless, but the image had already burned itself into the collective consciousness of the galaxy. On Earth, in the gleaming towers of New Geneva, the United Earth Council watched in stunned silence as the broadcast played on repeat. Admiral Helena Ross, veteran of the Proxima campaign, felt her hands clench into fists as she watched the Claren elder's antenna stroke the child's hair with infinite gentleness. Around the table, seasoned diplomats and hardened generals sat in absolute stillness, the weight of the moment pressing down like the silence before a supernova. In the viewing galleries above, crowds had gathered, their faces reflecting a mixture of rage and awe that would soon ignite into something far more dangerous. Across Earth's cities, the reaction was immediate and volcanic. In the hablocks of Luna City, mothers held their own children closer as they watched the broadcast. In the agricultural domes of Mars, fathers stopped their work to stare at the screens with expressions that promised retribution. The child's face, young, innocent, unmistakably human, became a mirror in which every parent saw their own offspring. Social networks exploded with calls for action, while news anchors struggled to maintain their composure as they reported on what many were already calling the shielding. The Galactic Commerce Network, always eager for drama, ran endless analysis pieces. Will Earth's military respond? Can the human fleet reach Kellen Prime before the Hegemony consolidates control? What does this mean for interspecies relations? But those questions missed the deeper current running through human space, a current that would soon become a tsunami. In the sprawling council chambers of the Hegemony capital, alien delegates huddled in urgent conference. The Zephyrians, with their forearms gesticulating wildly, argued for immediate containment. The crystalline Vorthok pulsed with nervous energy, their formations shifting like living geometry. They had all heard the stories of human warfare, the Solar Wars, the Titan Rebellion, the way Earth's children fought with a fury that bordered on madness when their own were threatened. Now, for the first time in galactic history, humans had been given a reason to care about an alien species. The Talarian ambassador, Elder Thrixanol, stood alone in the center of the chamber, his compound eyes reflecting the harsh light as he waited for judgment. His people had interfered in Hegemony business, violated neutrality protocols, committed what amounted to treason in the eyes of galactic law. He expected punishment, exile, perhaps even the extinction protocols that had been whispered about in the darkest corners of space. Instead, on the 7th day after the shielding, space above Kellen Prime erupted in points of brilliant light. Earth's first expeditionary fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, 37 ships of the line, their black holes drinking in starlight like hungry shadows. At their head flew the ENS, Righteous Fury, Admiral Ross herself, at the con, her voice cutting through the static as she hailed all frequencies. "This is the United Earth Navy. We have come for our child." The Hegemony forces, caught completely off guard, scrambled to respond, but the human fleet had already achieved orbital supremacy. Dropships launched like angry wasps, carrying not the mass-produced soldiers of other species, but humans, each one volunteer. Each one burning with the same protective fury that had driven their ancestors to fight across old Earth's bloodiest battlefields. On the surface, the first human boots touched alien soil with reverent care. These were not conquerors come to claim territory, but guardians, answering a call that transcended species boundaries. Commander Sarah Martinez knelt beside the eldest Claren, her medical scanner already working to assess his wounds. "Thank you," she said simply, the words carrying across the translation matrix to touch something deep in the alien's compound heart. Around them, other humans worked with quiet efficiency, establishing defensive perimeters, while medics tended to the wounded. The child she had told them her name was Emma clung to the Claren elder's thorax, unwilling to be separated from the beings who had risked everything to keep her safe. When Admiral Ross finally arrived at the crash site, she found a scene that would be burned into military academy textbooks for generations. Humans and Claren working side by side, the barriers of biology dissolving in the face of shared sacrifice. The formal declaration came 3 days later, delivered simultaneously to every major power in the galaxy. Admiral Ross stood before the assembled cameras, her dress uniform pristine, despite the dust of 3 worlds, her voice carrying the weight of 13 billion human souls. The Talaran species showed courage that humbles us all. When they could have walked away, when they could have chosen safety, they chose to shield one of our children. From this day forward, from this moment until the heat death of the universe, the Talaran are under Earth's protection. Their worlds are our worlds. Their battles are our battles. Their children are our children. The words rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave, carried by quantum communicators and hyperspace relays to every corner of civilized space. In the great council chambers of a dozen empires, delegates sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. No species in galactic history had ever been granted such status by humanity. Earth had treaties, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, but never had they opened their arms to embrace another species as family. The Claren delegation, led by Elder Thrixnel himself, wept openly as the translation came through their neural interfaces. For millennia, their people had been prey too gentle to fight, too valuable as healers to be ignored, always dependent on the mercy of stronger species. Now, for the first time since they had achieved spaceflight, they would sleep safely. Admiral Ross raised her clenched fist, the ancient human gesture that had once rallied armies across a dozen worlds. If you strike them, you strike us. If you threaten them, you threaten us. If you harm even one Claren child, you will answer to the combined might of the United Earth Navy. This I swear. By the blood of our ancestors and the promise of our future. The galaxy's response was immediate and divided. The Hegemony, still smarting from their humiliation, above Kellen Prime, issued formal protests through diplomatic channels. How dare Earth claim jurisdiction over a species that had never asked for their protection? How dare they interfere in the natural order of galactic politics? The Zephyrian Trade Confederation, ever practical, began calculating the economic implications of having a major human ally among the galaxy's most skilled healers. Smaller species, those who had lived under the constant threat of stronger neighbors, watched with growing hope. If Earth would protect the Claren, perhaps there was safety to be found in human friendship. In the refugee camps scattered across 100 worlds, beings who had never seen a human except in propaganda holovids began to whisper a new prayer. Shield us. As they shielded the child, the first test came sooner than anyone expected. A Claren merchant vessel, the Gentle Current, was intercepted by Hegemony raiders while carrying medical supplies to the Outer Rim territories. The pirates, either ignorant of Earth's declaration or arrogant enough to believe it was an empty threat, disabled the ship and prepared to take its crew for the slave markets. They had barely begun transferring prisoners when space around them lit up with the distinctive blue fire of human plasma drives. The End's vengeance materialized from stealth, her weapons already locked on target. Captain James Chun's voice crackled across all frequencies, cold as the void between stars. Release our friends. Now. When the pirate captain demanded to know by what authority humans interfered with Hegemony business, Chen's response became legend in naval academies across human space. By the authority of a 7-year-old girl who trusted the wrong people to keep her safe. By the authority of 3 aliens who chose to be better than the rest of us. The pirates made the mistake of opening fire. The engagement lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, timed from the first plasma burst to the moment the last pirate ship went dark. When the Gentle Current's crew was safely aboard human vessels, Captain Chen addressed them through the translation matrix. You are our brothers now. Anyone who harms you answers to us. The recording of that battle, transmitted across subspace networks, by merchant vessels and news drones, carried a message that resonated from the core worlds to the Outer Rim. Earth's protection was not symbolic. It was absolute, immediate, and devastating to anyone foolish enough to test it. In the weeks that followed, attacks on Claren vessels dropped to zero. Even the most opportunistic pirates learned to recognize their distinctive bioships and give them a wide berth. But Earth's new role as protector brought unexpected complications. Within a month of the declaration, human embassies across the galaxy were flooded with petitions from other species seeking protection. The gentlefolk of Procyon, facing extinction from corporate mining operations. The singing crystals of Vega, whose homeworld was being strip-mined for rare elements. The moss shepherds of the Magellanic Clouds, driven from their traditional grazing grounds by military expansions. Each petition came with its own tragic story, its own desperate plea for sanctuary under Earth's growing shadow. Admiral Ross, now serving as Earth's first Protector General, established strict criteria for what humanity would later call the Guardianship Protocols. Species seeking protection had to demonstrate not just need, but honor a willingness to sacrifice for others, as the Claren had sacrificed for one human child. The protocols were tested when the Kithara, a warrior species from the galactic south, applied for protection. Their worlds were under threat from a Hegemony battle group, and their fleet was badly outgunned. But the Kithara had a dark history. They had once enslaved the peaceful harmonics of their home system, using them as living computers for their war machines. Admiral Ross's rejection was swift and public. Earth protects those who protect others. We do not shield predators from their prey. The decision sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles, but it also sent a message. Humanity's protection came with moral weight. To stand under Earth's guard, a species had to be worthy of it. The Claren, meanwhile, flourished under their new protection. Their healing techniques, previously hoarded by the few species wealthy enough to afford them, were shared freely with human medical corps. The war that everyone predicted finally came in the third year after the declaration. The Hegemony, tired of seeing their authority challenged by what they considered an upstart species from the galactic periphery, assembled the largest battle fleet in recorded history. 1,700 ships of the line, from massive dreadnoughts to nimble destroyers, all converging on the Claren home system of sanctuary. The threat was delivered with typical Hegemony arrogance. Surrender the Claren to Hegemony authority, or watch their worlds burn. Earth's response was broadcast simultaneously across every inhabited system in the galaxy. President Catherine Jung stood in the United Nations General Assembly, her words carried by quantum relay to the farthest reaches of known space. The Hegemony asks us to abandon those who would not abandon us. They demand we betray those who showed us the meaning of honor. Our answer is simple. No. Come and take them. The Battle of Sanctuary lasted 18 hours, and changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Earth's Third Fleet, reinforced by volunteer squadrons from across human space, met the Hegemony armada at the edge of the system. What followed was not a battle but a demonstration, a carefully orchestrated display of why humanity had conquered its home system in less than 3 centuries. Admiral Ross, commanding from the bridge of the Righteous Fury, employed tactics that the Hegemony had never seen before. Human ships fought in perfect coordination, each crew member linked through quantum neural interfaces that allowed response times measured in milliseconds, rather than seconds. They used their smaller numbers not as a disadvantage but as a weapon, striking with surgical precision at the joints and weak points of the massive enemy formation. When the Hegemony flagship Inevitable Conquest finally exploded, taking half their command structure with it, the surviving enemy ships fled in disorder. Admiral Ross could have pursued, could have turned the retreat into a massacre that would have echoed across the galaxy for generations. Instead, she let them go, broadcasting a message that would become the foundation of what historians would later call the New Galactic Order. We did not come here to conquer. We came here to protect. Return to your worlds and tell them what you have seen. Tell them that Earth keeps its promises. In the aftermath, as rescue ships pulled survivors from the wreckage of both fleets, Claren medical teams worked alongside human medics to save lives regardless of species. The image of Elder Thrixnel himself tending to the wounds of a Hegemony pilot became one of the most reproduced photographs in galactic history. The victory at Sanctuary broke the Hegemony's military dominance. But more importantly, it broke their moral authority. Across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for millennia began to hope. The gentlefolk, the singing crystals, the moss shepherds one by one. They approached Earth's embassies with formal applications for protection. Each application was carefully reviewed according to the Guardianship Protocols, but those who met the criteria found themselves embraced by a growing family of protected worlds. Earth's fleet, once designed to defend 13 billion humans, expanded to cover thousands of star systems and hundreds of species. The human military academies established new courses in xenobiology and interspecies psychology, preparing the next generation of officers to serve as guardians rather than conquerors. On the 5th anniversary of the shielding, Emma returned to Kellan Prime as a young woman of 12, accompanied by her adoptive Claren family. The world had been rebuilt, but not as it was before. The new cities incorporated both human and Claren architectural principles, creating spaces where beings of any species could feel at home. At the memorial erected on the site where she had been found, Emma placed a wreath of earth flowers beside a cluster of Claren memory crystals. Elder Thrixonal, now ancient by his species standards but still sharp in mind and spirit, stood beside her, as cameras from a dozen worlds recorded the moment. "You gave me more than protection," she told him, her words translated through the memorial's speakers. "You gave me proof that strangers can choose to love each other." The old Claren's compound eyes shimmered with unshed tears as he replied, "And you, little sister, gave us something we had never dreamed of. Family that spans the stars." Behind them, the rebuilt city hummed with the voices of 100 species, all living under the protection of the blue and white flag that now flew on 1,000 worlds. Children of every conceivable shape and size played together in the memorial gardens, while their parents, human, Claren, and dozens of other species, watched with the easy confidence of those who know their young are safe. In the distance, the sleek forms of Earth's guardian fleet could be seen against the stars, eternal sentinels keeping watch over all who had chosen honor over expedience, love over fear. The galaxy had learned the lesson written in plasma fire above Sanctuary: touch Earth's children and face Earth's fury. But more importantly, it had learned the deeper truth that the Claren had demonstrated on that smoky battlefield so long ago. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in what you can destroy, but in what you choose to protect. In the end, 3 fragile beings had shielded 1 human child, and in doing so, had taught an entire galaxy the true meaning of courage.